Life with Ryan was, for the most part, a soft hum of easy comfort. We'd shared our little apartment for nearly 2 years, a place that felt more like a grown-up treehouse than a city dwelling. My name is Ethan, and I'm gay, a fact I've been open about since I was old enough to understand what it meant. It wasn't a secret, not from Ryan, not from anyone. He knew, of course, and it never seemed to matter one bit. Our friendship was built on late-night pizza runs, shared streaming passwords, and a mutual understanding that some days you just needed quiet company while you scrolled through your phone. Ryan was straight, undeniably so, with a calm strength about him that made you feel safe. He had a way of looking at the world that was steady and kind. We'd met in college, bonding over a terrible group project and a shared love for old action movies. When the time came to find a place after graduation, it just made sense to move in together. There was never any awkwardness. My dates came and went. Sometimes they stayed over, and Ryan would just nod a friendly hello if he saw them in the kitchen making coffee. He'd tease me sometimes, in a gentle way, about my taste in men or my latest dating app adventure. But it was always with a smile. It was the kind of friendship where you could leave your dirty socks on the floor for a day or two, and the biggest complaint would be a playful groan. Our mornings often started with the clatter of Ryan making coffee, the rich smell drifting into my room. I'd usually stumble out, still half asleep, and join him at the small kitchen table. We'd talk about our plans for the day, what was happening at our jobs, or just complain about the rising cost of groceries. In the evenings, sometimes we'd cook dinner together, taking turns choosing the music. Ryan was surprisingly good at making pasta, and I was the reigning champion of stir-fries. Other nights, we'd just grab takeout and collapse onto the sofa, watching whatever new series had caught our eye. Sometimes not even talking, just existing comfortably in the same space. There was a routine to our lives, a rhythm that was soothing and predictable. We respected each other's space, but we were always there for each other. If I had a tough day at work, Ryan would be the first to offer to pick up my favorite ice cream. If he was stressed about a deadline, I'd make sure his favorite mug was clean and ready for his morning tea. It wasn't just living together. It was a partnership. A quiet understanding that we were each other's chosen family in a city far from our actual ones. We knew each other's habits, our quirks, our little rituals. Ryan knew I snored sometimes, and I knew he talked in his sleep when he was really tired. It was all just part of the fabric of our easy, shared life. We had a good thing going, a truly good thing, and I never really thought it would change. Why would it? Everything felt so settled, so perfectly balanced. The predictability of our lives together was a comfort, a warm blanket I'd grown used to. So when I met Leo, it felt like a gentle ripple in that calm water, nothing more. Leo was charming, with a quick smile and an even quicker wit. We'd been out a few times, just casual dates, but there was a spark. I'd mentioned him to Ryan over one of our usual takeout dinners. Ryan had just nodded, focused on his pad thai, asking a polite question or two about what Leo did for work. It was all very normal, very much how things always were. That Friday night, Leo and I had dinner downtown. The conversation flowed easily, full of laughter and shared stories. By the end of the evening, as we stood outside my apartment building, a comfortable silence settled between us. The air was cool, and the city hummed around us. He leaned in, and the kiss was sweet and lingering. It felt right. I invited him up. Walking into our apartment, I was mindful of the late hour. Ryan was probably asleep, or at least in his room. The apartment was dark, save for the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the living room window. I whispered to Leo, "My roommate's probably asleep." He nodded, a soft smile on his face. We tried to be quiet, slipping off our shoes by the door, but even quiet footsteps can echo in a still apartment. I led Leo to my room, the door clicking softly shut behind us. We talked for a while longer, our voices low, sharing stories and jokes in hushed tones. The evening was winding down, but there was a warmth that had settled between us, a closeness that felt promising. The laughter, even whispered, still carried. The soft murmurs, the rustle of clothes, the creak of my bed as we sat on the edge talking. These were all small sounds, but in the quiet of the night, they became distinct. I wasn't thinking about Ryan. Why would I be? This was just life, my life, and he was my roommate. He'd had dates stay over before, though less often than me. We had an unspoken rule of respect, of not making too much noise, but beyond that, it was understood that we each had our own lives. My room was my space, and what happened inside it was mine. But in the quiet of the apartment, the sounds from my room were probably clearer than I realized. A giggle from Leo, my own hushed response, the soft thud of a shoe hitting the floor, the low murmur of our conversation turning more intimate. It wasn't loud, not by any stretch, but it wasn't silent either. These were the sounds of two people getting closer, the subtle cues of budding romance, of a new connection forming. I imagined Ryan, if he was awake, hearing the muffled sounds through his wall. Perhaps he'd just roll over, pull his pillow tighter over his head, and drift back to sleep. That's what he always did. That's what I always did when I heard him. It was just the rhythm of living with someone else, a gentle, expected part of our shared space. I didn't think twice about it as I finally drifted off to sleep, a pleasant warmth in my chest from the evening spent with Leo. While I drifted off to sleep, feeling good about the evening with Leo, the sounds I hadn't given a second thought to were cutting through the quiet of the apartment in a very different way for Ryan. He wasn't asleep. Not really. He'd been in the living room, reading a book, when he heard the faint click of the front door. He'd recognized my footsteps, then heard another, lighter set. He'd heard my whispered apology to Leo about being quiet and the soft responses. A small frown had creased his brow then, but he'd simply gone to his room, figuring it was just another one of my dates. Nothing new. He'd settled into bed, pulling the covers up, trying to get lost in his own thoughts. But the wall between our rooms, usually a solid barrier, seemed to betray him that night. The soft murmurs from my room started, hushed laughter, barely audible but present. You could hear my voice, then Leo's. It was the low, intimate tone that struck him first. It wasn't just talking. It was the sound of two people drawing close, sharing secrets that weren't meant for anyone else's ears. Ryan tried to ignore it. He squeezed his eyes shut, pressed his pillow against his ear. He told himself it was just noise, normal roommate noise. He'd heard it before. But tonight, it felt different. Each soft giggle from Leo, each whispered word from me, felt like a tiny prick, a strange, uncomfortable sensation in his chest. He heard the creak of my bed, a sound he knew so well. But tonight it wasn't just a familiar sound. It was loaded with a meaning he didn't want to think about. His jaw tightened. He felt a sudden, unexpected heat rise in him, a flush that spread across his face. He felt angry. And then, just as quickly, confused by that anger. Why was he angry? It was my life, my room, my date. This was normal. He knew I was gay. He knew I dated men. He'd been fine with it for years, so why did his stomach feel like it was twisting into knots? Why did his hands clench into fists beneath the covers? He threw off the covers suddenly, sitting bolt upright in bed. His heart was thumping hard, a frantic drum against his ribs. He felt restless, agitated. The soft sounds from my room seemed to grow louder, more insistent, even though he knew they hadn't actually changed. It was his own mind making them louder, coloring them with a feeling he couldn't name, a feeling that was sharp and unwelcome. He got out of bed, pacing the small space of his room. He ran a hand through his hair, tugging at it slightly. His breath was coming a little faster, a little shallower. He felt a strange mix of hurt and something else, something he couldn't grasp. His mind raced, replaying snippets of sounds, flashes of images he tried to push away. He felt like he couldn't breathe properly in his own room, in his own skin. He stopped by the door, his ear pressed almost instinctively to the wood. The sounds were fainter now, but he could still imagine them. He closed his eyes, a strange ache spreading through his chest. He was visibly shaken, his face pale in the dim light of his room, his shoulders slumped. This wasn't just another date. This was something else entirely. And whatever it was tearing at him, making him feel a turmoil he'd never experienced before. He retreated from the door, stumbling back to his bed, not to sleep, but to lie there, wide awake and deeply unsettled, until the first hint of dawn. The next morning, the apartment felt different. I woke up feeling rested and cheerful after my evening with Leo, humming a little tune as I padded into the kitchen. The smell of coffee was already in the air, but something else was off. Ryan was at the counter stirring his mug, his back to me. Usually, he'd turn and offer a sleepy morning, maybe even a joke about how late I'd been up. But today, he just kept stirring. "Morning, Ryan," I said, a little too brightly, trying to inject some normal into the air. He mumbled something, a low sound that wasn't quite a morning. He didn't turn around. I poured myself a cup of coffee, feeling a slight prickle of unease. Was he tired? Was he in a bad mood? It wasn't like him to be so quiet, especially on a Saturday morning. "Rough night?" I ventured, trying to catch his eye. He finally turned, but his gaze flitted past me, landing somewhere on the wall behind my head. His eyes looked a little red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept well, and there were faint shadows under them. He looked pale. His face seemed closed off, a mask I didn't recognize. "No, fine," he said, his voice flat. He took a sip of his coffee, avoiding looking at me directly. He quickly turned back to the counter, busying himself with putting his mug in the sink with a bit more force than necessary. I frowned. This wasn't like him at all. Our mornings were usually filled with easy chatter. Now there was a heavy silence hanging between us, thick and uncomfortable. I tried to break it. "So, I was thinking of grabbing some bagels from that new place later. Want anything?" I asked, leaning against the counter, trying to keep my tone light. He shrugged, still not making eye contact. "Nah, I'm good. Got stuff to do." "Stuff to do?" I asked, surprised. He usually loved Saturday bagel runs. "Like what?" "Just things," he said, his voice clipped. He walked out of the kitchen then, quickly, heading towards his room without another word. The door clicked shut softly, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my half-empty coffee mug and a growing sense of confusion. It wasn't just the lack of eye contact. It was the way he moved, too quickly, too stiffly. His shoulders seemed tighter, his usual relaxed posture replaced by something rigid, and he was quieter, much quieter than usual. The comfortable sounds of him moving around, humming to himself or chatting on the phone, were all gone. The apartment felt strangely empty, even though he was just in the next room. Throughout the day, this new, quiet Ryan persisted. If he walked into a room I was in, he would either freeze for a second, then quickly find an excuse to leave, or he would go about his business with a strained focus, pretending I wasn't there. If our paths crossed in the hallway, his eyes would dart away instantly, a strange shadow flickering in them. He seemed distracted, his mind elsewhere, even when he was just sitting on the sofa, scrolling on his phone. It was like he was present physically, but mentally he was miles away, wrapped up in something I couldn't understand. I tried to shrug it off at first. Maybe he was just having a bad day. Everyone had them. But as the hours passed, the shift in his behavior became more pronounced, more unsettling. The comfortable hum of our shared life had been replaced by a jarring silence, punctuated by his distant movements and averted gaze. It felt like a cold front had moved into our apartment, and I couldn't figure out why. What had happened between last night and this morning to make him act like a stranger? The distant, quiet Ryan lasted through the weekend and bled into the next week. The confusion I felt slowly started to mix with something else, a prickling awareness. It wasn't just that he was avoiding me. It was that sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, he was watching me. The first time I really noticed it was Monday morning. I was in the kitchen making toast, my back to the living room. I felt a strange chill, a sense of being observed. I slowly turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen, his eyes fixed on me. His expression was unreadable, a mix of something intense and something guarded. The moment our eyes met, he quickly looked away, his face flushing slightly, and he muttered something about needing to grab his keys before practically bolting out the door. It happened again that evening. I was on the sofa, scrolling through my phone, just relaxing after work. Ryan was in the kitchen, ostensibly getting a glass of water. I glanced up, and through the reflection in the dark TV screen, I saw him. He wasn't looking at his water glass. He was looking at me, his gaze heavy and fixed. The moment I shifted, even slightly, his head snapped away, and he busied himself with the faucet, pretending to adjust the flow. This wasn't the casual glance of a roommate. This was different. There was an intensity to it, a strange, almost hungry quality that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was unsettling. It wasn't hostile, not exactly, but it wasn't friendly either. It felt like he was studying me, trying to figure something out, or perhaps just lost in his own thoughts while I happened to be in his line of sight. The uneasy feeling grew over the next few days. I'd be doing something completely mundane, loading the dishwasher, reading a book, even just walking from my room to the bathroom, and I'd feel it. That familiar prickle on the back of my neck, the sense of eyes on me. I'd look up, and more often than not, I'd catch Ryan's gaze. He was never bold about it. His eyes would always dart away the second he knew I'd seen him, a quick, almost panicked movement. Sometimes he'd pretend to be looking at something else entirely, like a spot on the ceiling or a book on the shelf. It made me feel exposed, like I was constantly under a microscope. Our apartment, which had always felt like a sanctuary, began to feel a little too small, a little too open. I started to adjust my own behavior without even realizing it. I'd linger in my room a little longer, waiting until I was sure Ryan was occupied before I ventured out. I'd try to keep my back to him if we were in the same room, hoping to avoid catching his strange, intense stare. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. This wasn't the Ryan I knew. The easygoing, open guy who would tease me playfully was gone, replaced by someone who watched me from the shadows of his own troubled thoughts. His eyes, when I did catch them, held a mix of emotions I couldn't decipher. A flicker of sadness, a hint of frustration, and something else. Something almost like longing that made no sense at all. It was creating a thick, unspoken tension in our home, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells, unsure of what had caused this shift or how to make it stop. The comfortable hum was now a strained silence, punctuated by his silent, unsettling observation. The silent watching was strange enough, but then Ryan's behavior took another odd turn. He started to interrupt. It wasn't always obvious, but it became a pattern that was hard to ignore, especially when it involved my phone calls or my plans with other people. One afternoon, I was on the phone with Leo, making plans for our second date. We were laughing, talking about a movie we wanted to see. I was sitting on the sofa, feeling relaxed and happy. Suddenly, Ryan appeared in the living room doorway. He wasn't subtle. He cleared his throat loudly, then started fumbling with a stack of old magazines on the coffee table. "Oh, sorry," I mumbled to Leo, covering the phone's mouthpiece. "Hey, Ryan, everything okay?" Ryan looked up, his eyes a little too wide, a little too innocent. "Yeah, just looking for that old issue of National Geographic about the Amazon. You know, the one with the jaguars?" I stared at him. We'd had those magazines for years, and he'd never once shown an interest in them. I think it's in the basket by the TV," I said, trying to keep my focus on Leo. Ryan didn't move. He just stood there, awkwardly rifling through the magazines on the table, making unnecessary noise. It was enough to break my flow with Leo. I wrapped up the call quickly, feeling a little annoyed. As soon as I hung up, Ryan suddenly found the magazine he was looking for and retreated to his room without another word. It wasn't just phone calls. If I was chatting with a friend who came over, Ryan would suddenly appear, needing to ask me something urgent about a bill that wasn't due for weeks, or offering to make tea for everyone, when he rarely offered such things. The conversations would fizzle out, the energy broken, and he would eventually leave, leaving me feeling frustrated and my friend looking confused. One evening, I was excitedly telling a friend on speakerphone about a new job opportunity I was hoping to get. I was walking around the kitchen, pacing with energy. Ryan was supposedly in his room, but the moment I started talking about the interview, his door opened. He walked into the kitchen, grabbed a bowl from the cupboard, and started making a very loud, very unnecessary snack. The clatter of the bowl, the crunch of chips, the rustle of the bag, it was all perfectly timed to make it impossible to hear my friend, or for my friend to hear me. "Ryan, can you hold on a sec?" I asked, my voice tight with irritation. He looked up, a chip halfway to his mouth, his eyes wide again. "Oh, sorry, am I interrupting?" he asked, but his tone sounded more like a question he already knew the answer to. "Yeah, a little," I said, trying to force a polite smile. He just nodded slowly, then continued crunching his chips, effectively ending my detailed conversation. It felt deliberate. It felt like he was finding any excuse to insert himself into my interactions with other people, or to simply be near me when I was engaged with someone else. He'd come into the living room to charge his phone just as I was about to leave for a date, lingering by the door, asking me a string of trivial questions about my evening. He'd hover in the kitchen while I was making plans on the phone, cleaning a spot on the counter that was already spotless. The easy space we used to share felt invaded. The quiet watching had morphed into active disruption. It was like he didn't want me to have private conversations or make plans without him being somehow involved, or at least aware. The tension in the apartment tightened further, a sticky web of unspoken questions and increasingly strange behavior. I started to dread picking up the phone or making plans, knowing that Ryan would likely appear, a silent, watchful, and oddly disruptive presence. The interruptions, though annoying, still felt like some twisted form of engagement. But then Ryan's behavior shifted again, moving from disruptive to outright cold. It was a kind of emotional distance I'd never experienced from him before, a deliberate pushing away whenever I tried to bridge the growing gap between us. I tried to talk to him. I really did. One evening, after a particularly awkward dinner where he barely spoke and excused himself immediately after eating, I followed him to his room. "Hey, Ryan," I started, knocking softly on his door. "Can we talk for a minute?" He opened the door just a crack, his face half hidden by the frame. His eyes were flat, devoid of their usual warmth. "About what?" he asked, his voice flat and guarded. "About everything," I said, feeling a surge of frustration. "You've been acting weird lately, distant, and honestly, it's making me feel pretty uncomfortable. Is everything okay?" He sighed, a heavy, put-upon sound. "I'm fine, Ethan. Just busy, stressed with work." He offered no further explanation, no apology for his behavior, just a dismissive wave of his hand. It was a brush-off, plain and simple. "But you're usually not like this when you're stressed," I pressed, trying to keep my voice calm. "We always talk about stuff. Remember that big project last month? You practically lived in the living room complaining about it." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Well, I'm different now, I guess. People change." His voice was laced with an edge I didn't recognize, an almost harsh tone. He started to close the door slowly, clearly signaling the end of the conversation. "Ryan, wait," I said, putting my hand on the door, stopping it. What's going on? Is it something I did? Did I upset you? His eyes, when they met mine for a fleeting second, held a flash of something I couldn't quite place. Pain? Resentment? He pulled the door back with a sharp tug, forcing my hand away. Just leave it, Ethan. I'm tired. I just want to be left alone. And then the door clicked shut, the finality of the sound echoing in the silent hallway. It felt like a punch to the gut. The easy camaraderie we'd shared, the openness, it was all gone, replaced by a wall of ice. He wasn't just quiet or distracted anymore. He was actively shutting me out, pushing me away. He started eating meals in his room more often, claiming he had work to do, even on weekends. He put on headphones the moment he entered the common areas, effectively cutting off any chance of casual conversation. If I tried to make a joke, he'd offer a strained, weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. If I asked about his day, he'd give one-word answers. There was a particular instance when I came home from work, excited to tell him about a small win I'd had. He was on the sofa, watching TV. I sat down next to him, ready to launch into my story. "You won't believe what happened today at the office," I began, my voice bubbling with enthusiasm. He didn't even turn his head. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, his posture rigid. He mumbled, a non-committal sound that felt like a brick wall. I tried again. "No, seriously, it was wild. My boss actually complimented my presentation, and you know how rare that is." He still didn't look at me. He just reached for the remote and turned up the volume on the TV, effectively drowning out my voice. It was a clear, undeniable signal. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to engage. The coldness was heartbreaking. It wasn't just that he was quiet. It was that he was deliberately making himself unavailable, emotionally absent. Our apartment, once a home filled with shared laughter and comfortable silences, now felt like two strangers occupying the same space, with an invisible yet impenetrable barrier between us. I felt a deep ache of loneliness, a confusing sense of rejection, wondering what I had done to warrant such a profound and sudden withdrawal from someone who had been my closest friend. The shift from disruption to outright coldness was the hardest to bear. It left me feeling not just annoyed, but genuinely confused and hurt. Every interaction, or lack thereof, twisted a knot in my stomach. I kept replaying our last normal conversations, searching for a clue, a wrong word, anything that might explain this sudden, chilling distance. Had I said something offensive? Done something to cross a line? My mind raced, trying to pinpoint a mistake, an accidental slight that could have triggered such a profound change in our friendship. I thought back to the night Leo stayed over. Could that be it? But Ryan had always been fine with my dates. He'd seen them come and go, never batted an eye. It didn't make sense. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself that I must have done something, even if I couldn't remember what. The idea that I had somehow alienated my closest friend in the city, someone I considered family, was a heavy weight on my chest. I decided I had to talk to him again, properly this time, without the door as a barrier. I waited until I knew he was home and not holed up in his room. He was in the living room, scrolling through his phone, headphones conspicuously absent. I sat on the opposite sofa, trying to look casual. "Hey, Ryan," I started, my voice softer than I intended. "Can we really talk for a minute? About us?" He looked up, his eyes briefly meeting mine before darting away. He sighed, a familiar, exasperated sound. "Ethan, there's nothing to talk about. I told you, I'm just busy. Work's been crazy." He went back to his phone, his thumbs moving quickly. "No, that's not it," I insisted, my voice gaining a little strength. "This isn't like you. You're different. You're cold. And it's making me feel really bad. I don't know what I did, but if I upset you, I really want to know so I can fix it." He paused his scrolling, but still didn't look at me. His shoulders seemed to slump a little. "You didn't do anything, Ethan. Seriously, there's nothing to fix." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it lacked any real emotion. It was a practiced deflection, a verbal wall. "But you won't even look at me," I pointed out, my voice laced with the hurt I felt. "You avoid me. You interrupt my calls. You shut me out when I try to talk to you. That's not nothing, Ryan. That's a huge change." He finally lifted his head, his gaze sweeping over my face for a second, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before settling on a point just beyond my shoulder. "I don't know what you want me to say, Ethan," he said, his voice tight. "I'm just not feeling very social lately. I need space." "Space?" I echoed, incredulous. "We live together, Ryan. We practically share a brain. This isn't space. This is you putting up a giant wall and pretending I don't exist. If something's bothering you, please just tell me. We're friends. We can work through it." He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "I just told you, nothing's bothering me. You're overthinking it. I'm fine. We're fine." His voice was flat. Final. He stood up abruptly. "I'm going for a walk. I need some air." And with that, he left, leaving me sitting there, more confused and hurt than before. His deflection was so complete, so resolute, that it left no room for discussion. It was a rejection of my attempts to connect, a denial of the clear shift in our dynamic. I was left with the painful conclusion that he either genuinely didn't see it, or he refused to acknowledge it, leaving me adrift in a sea of unspoken tension and unanswered questions. The easy comfort of our home had vanished, replaced by a bewildering and painful estrangement. The unresolved tension in the apartment felt like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap at any moment. My attempts to talk to Ryan had been met with a brick wall, leaving me feeling frustrated and increasingly resentful. It was only a matter of time before something trivial sparked a larger fire. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I was trying to cook dinner, a simple pasta dish, but the kitchen was a mess. Ryan had left his dirty coffee mug on the counter, a few crumbs from his breakfast toast, and a pile of mail he hadn't bothered to sort. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. We often had small messes, and we'd usually clean up together or just ignore it until one of us got to it. But tonight, it felt like an insult. The culmination of weeks of his distant behavior, his coldness, his constant deflection. I sighed loudly, picking up his mug and putting it in the sink with a bit more force than necessary. Then I started wiping down the counter. Just as I was doing so, Ryan walked in, heading for the fridge. "You know, it would be nice if you cleaned up after yourself sometimes, Ryan," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The words just spilled out, fueled by my pent-up frustration. He froze, his hand on the fridge door. He slowly turned to face me, and his eyes, usually so calm, were suddenly dark and narrowed. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I was taken aback by his sudden shift. "I said it would be nice if you cleaned up. The kitchen's a disaster. It's not just my responsibility, you know." I gestured vaguely at the small pile of mail. That's when it truly erupted. Ryan slammed the fridge door shut, the sound echoing through the small apartment. He took a step towards me, his face flushed with anger. "Are you serious, Ethan? You're complaining about a coffee mug? After everything?" "After everything? What everything are you even talking about?" I shot back, suddenly just as angry. "You've been acting like a complete stranger for weeks. You won't talk to me, you ignore me, you interrupt me, and now you're mad about a mug?" "It's not about the mug," he practically roared, his voice booming in the small kitchen. He rarely raised his voice, and this sudden explosion startled me. His hands were clenched at his sides, his whole body tense. "It's about you, always you. Always doing whatever you want, not caring about anyone else." His anger was completely out of proportion to the situation. It was a coffee mug and some crumbs, not a major betrayal. But the fury in his eyes, the tremor in his voice, told me this wasn't about the mess. This was about something much, much deeper. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my own anger now mixed with confusion and a touch of fear. His face was contorted, almost unrecognizable. "When have I ever not cared about anyone else? Especially you. You're my best friend, Ryan," he scoffed, a bitter, dismissive sound. "Best friend, right. You just float through life, happy as a clam, while everyone else has to deal with your messes." He waved his hand wildly, encompassing not just the kitchen, but seemingly our entire apartment, our entire shared existence. The accusations stung deeply. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I pushed them back. "My messes? What messes, Ryan? Be specific, because all I've been doing is trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with you." He took a shaky breath, his chest heaving. His eyes were still blazing, but there was a flicker of something else in them now, a raw, exposed pain. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered, turning his back to me, his shoulders rigid. "You never do." And with that, he stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me standing amidst the scattered mail and the dirty mug, my heart pounding, the air thick with the residue of his explosive, irrational anger. The small argument had torn open a much larger wound, a chasm of unspoken feelings that now felt impossible to bridge. The explosion in the kitchen left me reeling. Ryan's words, his irrational anger, echoed in my head. "You wouldn't understand. You never do." They were like a brand, searing into my confusion and hurt. I couldn't let it go this time. The casual avoidance, the subtle interruptions, even the cold shoulder, I could try to rationalize them. But that raw, disproportionate fury? It was a sign that something was truly, fundamentally wrong. And I needed to know what. I gave him a few hours. I cleaned the kitchen, the mundane task a way to channel my restless energy. My hands trembled slightly as I scrubbed, replaying the scene. When I finally heard him moving around in his room again, a soft thud, a creak of the floorboards, I knew it was time. I walked to his door, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't going to be another gentle inquiry. This was going to be a demand for answers. I knocked firmly, not a tentative tap. "Ryan," I called out, my voice steady, though I didn't feel steady at all. "We need to talk. Now." There was a long silence from inside, then a sigh. I heard footsteps, slow and heavy. The door opened, revealing Ryan. His eyes were still red-rimmed, but the blazing anger was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. He looked tired, almost defeated. "What, Ethan?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of energy. He didn't invite me in, just stood there, leaning against the door frame, his arms crossed. "Don't what, Ethan, me?" I said, stepping closer, refusing to be dismissed. "That outburst in the kitchen was not normal, and your behavior for the past few weeks has not been normal. So tell me, Ryan, what is going on? Why are you acting like this? Why are you so different?" He ran a hand over his face, scrubbing at his eyes. "I told you. Work. Stress." "No," I cut him off, my voice sharp. "That's a lie, and you know it. We've been through stressful times before. This is different. This started the morning after Leo was here. What happened that night, Ryan? What did I do?" His head snapped up then, and his eyes finally met mine, a raw, exposed look in them. It was a mixture of pain, confusion, and something else, something I couldn't quite name. He looked away just as quickly, his gaze fixed on the wall behind me, but not before I saw it. "You didn't do anything," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Then why?" I pressed, stepping closer, forcing him to acknowledge me. "Why are you shutting me out? Why are you angry? Why do you look at me like that, and then pretend everything's fine? You're hurting me, Ryan. You're hurting our friendship. What is so bad that you can't even tell me?" He flinched at my words, a visible tremor going through him. He pushed himself off the door frame, turning his back to me and walking into his room. I followed him, refusing to let him retreat. "Ryan, look at me," I pleaded, my voice softer now, tinged with desperation. "Please, just tell me what's going on. What changed? Why are you so different?" He stopped in the middle of his room, his back still to me, his shoulders hunched. He was breathing heavily, as if he'd been running. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken words, of emotions he was clearly fighting to keep locked away. I could feel the tension radiating off him, a tangible force. He stood there for a long moment, completely still, and the silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I waited, my heart pounding, hoping, praying he would finally break. The silence in Ryan's room was heavy, thick with the weight of my question and his struggle. He stood there, his back to me, for what felt like an eternity. His shoulders rose and fell with each shaky breath, and I could almost feel the turmoil radiating off him. He was clearly fighting something deep inside. Finally, he moved, turning slowly to face me. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with a raw, desperate confusion. He looked utterly lost, like a child who couldn't find his way home. His hands were clenching and unclenching at his sides. I don't know, Ethan, he stammered, his voice hoarse, a whisper. I honestly don't know. Don't know what? I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle, seeing the distress etched on his face. The anger I'd felt moments ago was replaced by a deep concern. Why I'm like this, he said, shaking his head slowly. Why I can't just be normal. He took a step back, bumping into his desk, a small stack of books toppling to the floor with a soft thud. He didn't even seem to notice. Normal about what, Ryan? I pressed, stepping closer, wanting to reach out to him, but unsure if he would flinch away. About me? About us? He let out a short, choked laugh, a sound devoid of humor. About everything, Ethan. About you. About when you brought Leo home. The words came out in a rush, a dam finally breaking, though he still looked like he was fighting them. What about it? I asked, my heart hammering. This was it. The truth, or at least a piece of it. He squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them, staring at me with an intensity that made me take a small step back. It made me feel weird, really weird. I heard you two laughing, talking, and I couldn't stand it. His voice was tight, strained. You couldn't stand it? I repeated, utterly bewildered. Why? You've never cared about my dates before. You've always been supportive. I know, he burst out, his voice rising, a note of desperation in it. He ran both hands through his hair, pulling at it. That's what I don't understand. I should be fine with it. It's you. It's normal for you. But I felt this thing in my chest, like someone was squeezing it, and I wanted to break something. He was clearly in deep distress, his whole body trembling slightly. He looked like he was fighting against himself, against feelings he couldn't comprehend or accept. What kind of thing? I asked softly, trying to guide him, trying to understand the jumble of emotions he was clearly battling. He shook his head violently. I don't know. I don't know what it is, Ethan. It's wrong. It's not supposed to be there. I'm not supposed to feel like this. He was denying his own emotions, pushing them away even as he tried to articulate them. His brow was furrowed, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and self-loathing. It's just, everything's different now, he continued, his voice dropping again, full of despair. I see you and I feel things I shouldn't, and I hate it. I hate feeling like this. It makes me want to just disappear. He turned away from me again, his shoulders slumping, as if the weight of his unspoken feelings was too much to bear. He was trapped in a painful confusion, clearly wrestling with emotions he was desperate to deny. Ryan stood with his back to me, his shoulders hunched, the weight of his unarticulated feelings pressing down on him. I hate it. I hate feeling like this. It makes me want to just disappear. His words hung in the air, heavy with despair. I felt a pang of deep sympathy, seeing him so utterly lost and tormented. The anger that had fueled me earlier dissolved, replaced by a desperate need to help him. I took a cautious step forward. Ryan, I said, my voice soft, trying to break through the wall he was building around himself. You don't have to disappear. You don't have to hate how you feel. We can figure this out, whatever this is. He slowly turned, his eyes still wide and pained, but now there was a flicker of something else. A desperate plea, maybe, or a desperate hope. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in weeks. His gaze wasn't darting away. It was fixed, searching, intense. My breath hitched in my throat. He took a step towards me, then another. The small space of his room suddenly felt charged, electric. He reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly in the air, then gently, almost reverently, touched my arm. His fingers were warm, and the contact sent a shiver down my spine, a sensation that had nothing to do with cold. It was a jolt, an unexpected current that ran through me. His thumb brushed lightly against my sleeve, a feather-light touch that lingered, sending a warmth spreading through my skin. His eyes, dark and troubled just moments before, were now locked on mine, a silent conversation passing between us that went beyond words. In their depths, I saw not just confusion and pain, but a deep, yearning vulnerability that startled me. It was the same intensity I'd caught glimpses of when he'd been watching me, but now it was unfiltered, raw, and directed solely at me. The air around us thickened, growing heavy with unspoken emotions. I could feel the heat radiating from his hand on my arm, the slight tremble in his fingers. My own heart began to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. In that moment, all the noise of the past weeks, the arguments, the coldness, the confusion, faded away. There was only us, standing in his small room, connected by that single, lingering touch and the profound gaze that held me captive. His gaze dropped from my eyes to my lips, then back up again, his expression unreadable, yet filled with a potent, undeniable longing. It was a gaze that spoke of attraction, of a desire that had been carefully hidden, perhaps even from himself, until this very moment. I found myself unable to look away, drawn into the depth of his stare, feeling an answering pull, a strange, dizzying magnetic force. My mind raced, trying to reconcile this man, this intense, vulnerable, desiring man, with the stoic, straight roommate I thought I knew. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a hidden layer of feeling that had been simmering beneath the surface all along. The air between us crackled with an unresolved tension, a question hanging heavy and unspoken. He slowly withdrew his hand, the warmth leaving my arm, but the imprint of his touch remained, a ghost sensation. His eyes, however, did not leave mine. The moment was suspended, fragile, brimming with a truth neither of us had yet dared to voice. It was a truth that had always been there, perhaps, buried deep, now stirring awake. The unspoken feelings, the raw, undeniable attraction, hung between us, a powerful force that threatened to shatter the comfortable world we had built. The air vibrated with the silent question, heavy and potent after Ryan's hand left my arm. His eyes, still locked with mine, were swimming with an emotion I recognized but couldn't believe was directed at me. It was a dizzying moment, one where time seemed to stretch and twist, and the world outside Ryan's small room ceased to exist. I saw the struggle in his face, the internal battle raging behind those intense eyes. He was teetering on the edge of something immense, something he had fought with every fiber of his being. His lips parted slightly, then closed. He swallowed hard, his throat working. He looked away for a split second, a quick, desperate glance around his room as if searching for an escape. Then his gaze snapped back to mine, resolute. His chest heaved with a deep, shaky breath, and when he spoke, his voice was raw, thick with emotion, barely a whisper. I'm in love with you, Ethan. The words, so long unspoken, so fiercely denied, landed between us with the force of a physical blow. My heart, which had been pounding a frantic rhythm, seemed to stop altogether. The room spun for a moment, and I had to grab onto the edge of his desk to steady myself. In love with me? Ryan? My straight roommate? The friend I had shared 2 years of comfortable, platonic life with? He watched my face, his own expression a mixture of terror and relief. Tears welled in his eyes, shimmering in the dim light of his room, and then slowly, silently, tracked paths down his pale cheeks. He looked utterly broken, yet strangely liberated. I know, he continued, his voice cracking. I know it's crazy. I know you're gay, and I'm supposed to be straight. I've always been straight, but ever since I heard you with Leo, it just hit me. All those feelings I've been trying to push down, all the reasons I've been acting like an idiot, it's because of you. He took another shaky breath, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand, but the tears kept coming. I tried to hate it. I tried to hate you for making me feel this way. I tried to make it go away. That's why I was so angry, why I was so cold. Because it scares me, Ethan. It absolutely terrifies me. He stepped closer again, his gaze pleading. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what it means. All I know is that when you're happy, I'm happy. And when you hurt, I hurt. And when I heard you with someone else, it felt like my world was ending. It felt like I was losing something I didn't even know I had until that moment. He reached out again, this time his hand cupping my cheek, his touch gentle, trembling. His thumb stroked softly, and the warmth of his skin against mine was overwhelming. His eyes searched mine, raw and vulnerable. I'm so sorry, Ethan. For everything. For acting like a jerk. I couldn't face it. I couldn't face this. His voice was a broken whisper, full of a pain that went deeper than words, a pain of self-discovery and the fear of rejection. I looked into his eyes, seeing the years of unspoken feelings, the confusion, the denial, the fierce protection he had built around himself, all crumbling before me. The world had just shifted on its axis, and nothing would ever be the same. The comfortable hum of our lives was replaced by the deafening sound of a heart laid bare.